of Americans who say they've got a great deal or a fair amount of trust in the mass media has fallen to a record low, according to a new Gallup survey. Now, when Gallup first started asking Americans this question in the 1970s, trust in the media was at 72%. This year, it's at only 31%. Now, media critic Josie Glabach, better known as the Redheaded Libertarian, says that this shouldn't surprise anyone. She blames mainstream media for peddling partisan talking points that the American people can see right through. She joins us now. She's also a co-host of Timcast with Tim Pool and is very active in alternative media spaces and online. Nice to finally get to talk to you.
Nice to talk to you too, Robbie. Thank you for having me.
So we talk a lot on this show on Rising, as I'm sure you do, about the failures of the mainstream media and how they have gotten worse over time, how it has inspired a just broad lack of trust, not just from conservatives or libertarians, but from independents, from people on the left, from all sorts of people. It feels like someday I think the band of Americans who do trust the media, I'm trying to picture who they actually are. It's this smaller and smaller slice of American life. I say that could actually even be a good thing because, you know, you look back to the times in American history where the media was well trusted. I mean, was good policy happening then because no one had the courage to call out BS from the mainstream media?
Yes, I agree with that. And, you know, this actually goes back to the NDAA of 2013, where the Thornberry-Smith amendment, it lifted the domestic dissemination ban. So this had been the Smith-Mundt Act had instated this. And what they did, they repealed and replaced the Smith-Mundt Act, and they put in the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act, lifting the domestic dissemination ban, which allowed propaganda to freely flow through our country, again, for the first time since World War II. And if you think about when things really got crazy, and when you're watching the news and you're like, I'm being propagandized. My first time was when BLM came to the scene, and that was around 2013 or so. And I remember listening to the first coverage there and being like, I'm being propagandized. This isn't right. I'm being sold something right now. I'm not critically thinking about this. I'm being told what to think. And I think that a lot of Americans are waking up to this, whereas people, maybe you and myself, have been awake for a while. They're more waking up to this. And I think Elon Musk buying X and allowing transparency in citizen journalism to kind of come to the forefront has been leading the charge in that.
Yeah, and your moniker is the Redheaded Libertarian. You're a libertarian like myself. I remember realizing, when the revelation started to come out, that so much of the censorship and the bad moderation that we complained about on the platforms for years, and it always put me in a little bit of a difficult position because at the end of the day, they are companies. They can make decisions I don't like. I can complain about it, but I don't want the government to come in and start telling them how to do moderation. I know, even if that didn't it violates my principles, so I can't support it. And even if it didn't violate my principles, I know the government coming in to do that would not make things better. In fact, we know for certain it would make things worse. But then what we learned is that so many of those bad moderation decisions, so much of that censorship was not even being freely chosen by the platforms pre-Musk. People I don't agree with are in charge of Twitter, but they didn't want to do a lot of the censorship either. They fought behind closed doors with the federal bureaucrats bossing them around until eventually they gave up because it was just so overwhelming. I think that really was a light bulb moment for me.
Yeah, and releasing the Twitter files and finding out all the corruption that was going on behind the scenes, that was really, it's something we kind of all suspected. We're like, there's no way this could be happening organically. People can't possibly be like this. It was all speculation and it was all a conspiracy. But then we find out that it actually had been happening like that. And now we know on X there's a stop to it. But now we can look at other media. We can look at Facebook and we can look at Instagram and other media like that and know that, yeah, they're probably still being fed points from the government and coerced by them to shut down what we want to say.
And right now, that coercion is, in my view, taking the form of the war on so-called misinformation and disinformation. It's very reminiscent to me of the hate speech distinction that you'd hear from so many people that, well, I support, many progressives feel on the left, I support free speech but not hate speech, even though those are the same thing. Hate speech is well protected under the category of free speech. I think that same idea is being applied to misinformation increasingly, where you have tech bureaucrats all over the globe. They seek to do this in America, but they're somewhat constrained by the First Amendment. But elsewhere, using the so-called spread of misinformation on social media as the reason to do censorship.
Yes, and that's correct. And it's Kamala Harris had come out and she had said, we need a general rule for everybody because you're reaching all these people. And it's like, no, you don't at all. So back like in the founding of our country, our country was founded based on people being anonymous. All right. So the Boston Tea Party was spearheaded by some guy who went by Rusticus. George Washington had his spy ring and they were all numbered. He was 711. Ben Franklin wrote under Do Good. Sam Adams wrote under Vindex. And so our being anonymous and being able to speak freely is what kind of spearheads revolutions. And I think, in part, that could be why they're so afraid of the anonymity and wanting to censor that and wanting to call it misinformation and lead by fear in that regard. Because when people are afraid, they're more apt to give up their essential liberty for temporary security.
There seems to be this hatred of social media platforms coming from mainstream and elite thinkers and policymakers and media figures, because social media has allowed people like you and I who have departing ideas from establishment orthodoxy to speak up and be successful and disagree with each other and with the powers that be. And social media has has broken the guardrails forever. I think that's why we see so much discussion or appetite among policymakers for more tech regulation, things of that nature, because they know. Hillary Clinton the other day called for more tech regulation because if we lose control of the internet, then we lose actually using the words control. They know that they need that control in order to prevent criticism of their policies.
Yes, absolutely. So that's why we had seen recently that they were coming for Elon Musk. I mean, they're coming for him every single day, it seems like. But recently they kind of came out and there was the guy that works under Keir Starmer over in the UK, and he was reaching out to Kamala about how they were going to harass Elon's advertisers in order to kind of beat him that way. And that's so offensive as an American that they even thought that they could do that. But also it makes you wonder, why did they think that they could do that? Why did they think they could reach out to the vice president and person running for future president of our country and try to invade our freedom of speech and our freedom of expression and our First Amendment? Like, what made them so confident that they were able to do that? And I think that that's a question we should all be asking.
I'm back with Josie Glabach, the Redheaded Libertarian, to discuss alternative media thriving in an era where the mainstream media is losing the trust of the American people. Thanks for being back with me.
Thank you for having me.
I wanted to ask you how you've built your following, because to be fair, I see your tweets are in my timeline constantly. You have built an audience of people, who turn to you for takes on politics, what's going on. And I want to get your, take on the election cycle in a moment. But how did you accomplish that?
Well, I guess it goes back. It's a little bit of a long story, but so I lived in Massachusetts. And I felt really kind of alone. And this was around 2017. And I had these different views from everybody in Massachusetts, really. And I kind of just wanted to relate to people. I wanted to kind of make friends that were like-minded. So I got on X just as an anonymous person and I started talking. And people were listening to me. And I thought that was, cool. I just wanted, like maybe 10 friends. And I ended up, I think in my first month, I had 5,000. And this number just kept doubling and doubling and doubling. It was just this crazy growth that I experienced. And then it came to 2021. And I went to log on to X one day. And I had about 80,000 followers at this point. And I couldn't. my page, it wouldn't let me in. And I never knew what I did or anything, but I was gone for about a year and a half. This was shortly after Joe Biden got into office, so right after the inauguration. And so I went to a separate account. I'm like, all right, well, I guess I'll just do it again. So I went to an account. It's called Queen Josie, and I just did it again. And I built my account over a year and a half to about 50,000. And then Elon Musk announced April 2022 that he was going to be buying X. The next day, I get my account back. The
Wow.
Redheaded Libertarian, I got it back. And from there, I don't know what happened. It just took off and grew and grew. And this was 2022, and I came back at about 70,000. And now I'm at 700, 750,000, something like that. So I think I've just kind of, I mean, it helps that I can engage with large accounts like Elon Musk will engage with me. And I work for Timcast, and it's great to have help in that regard, and people helping you and wanting to get your voice out there, I guess, in that regard. But also, I kind of cornered a market. I talk a lot about revolutionary history and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and things that people don't really talk about as much anymore. And I realized that that was missing from social media. And so I just filled the void, and people listen, and I absolutely love what I do.
Let's talk a little bit about politics. Your libertarian is in your name. I self-describe as a libertarian. The libertarian vote has been pursued. We have a party and a candidate, but it's also been pursued by the mainstream candidates to some degree. Donald Trump made an appearance at the Libertarian National Convention. He was actually booed. It was one of the only times he was in front of an audience that was capable of booing him. And then recently, just this week, Tim Walz was on with Jon Stewart, the Kamala Harris vice presidential pick, and he said that one of the benefits of having Liz Cheney in support of the Democratic ticket is that she can speak to Tea Party people and to libertarians. He actually said the word libertarian, which I'm always, my ears kind of always perk up when a major candidate says the word libertarian because it doesn't happen that often. To my mind, this was, well, he said the word, but the biggest misread of libertarianism you could possibly have, to think Liz Cheney is who's going to bring libertarians on board with Kamala Harris. Am I missing something?
I mean, I think we were all missing something when that happened. I remember reading it, and I was just like, wow, good news, guys. They've brought on Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney for libertarian outreach. Like, how much more disconnected from the libertarian ideology can you possibly be to bring on these war hawks? I mean, Dick Cheney manufactured every crisis we've had in the Middle East for the last 23 years. Like, there are millions of innocent people who are dead because of him. And being anti-war is something that's so close to a libertarian's heart. And so then it comes to Donald Trump. I was actually at the Libertarian National Convention when he was being booed. And he actually presented many libertarian ideals and promises to libertarians for if libertarians were to endorse him or vote for him. And those included freeing Ross Ulbricht, who, as we know, is in prison for creating a decentralized website for 2 life sentences. And he committed to freeing Ross. He committed to creating a board of libertarians to kind of look over the J6 cases and the abuses there. He promised to put a libertarian in his cabinet. He said he was going to abolish the Department of Education. So he has a lot of these libertarian ideas, and he does, and then looking at his past administration, he didn't start any new wars. And that was the first time of that to happen in a long time. So that's all great when it comes to libertarian principles. We still have issues with him. We still wonder about, he's still loving his role in COVID, which was one of the biggest abuses of power in our time. Well, he did hand it to the states and let them, do most of the work with that. And he didn't force anything on anyone, which is great. But he was very behind that COVID shot, which we know wasn't very safe, if I'm allowed to say that on the show. So anyway, that's my opinion.
Yeah, you're certainly entitled to your opinion. My opinion on Trump is that I mean, I have a lot of differences on policy. I'm certainly glad that he promised to free Ross Ulbricht. I've been very vocal on that. This is someone who's been who's got life in prison for exactly what you said, running a decentralized website, a victim of a kind of misunderstanding about new technology and new innovations that is so embedded in our system. I disagree with a lot of how Trump handled COVID as well. He's tried to run away from that to some degree. I mean, I don't think my view, I don't think the vaccines are dangerous. I certainly don't think they should be required or mandated. I think everyone should make that choice for themselves is my view. And that's Donald Trump's view as well. He said, I'm proud of making this available, but it should be your choice. It shouldn't be forced on anyone. My difficulty with Trump is, so I mean, he's promised. Now, tariffs are something both parties love. He's promised a lot of economic things that I don't think are great, and he's picked, J.D. Vance, who is, in fact, even more in support of those things than he is. And also because he did have 4 years, and I think it's kind of a hard sell to say, right, I'm going to abolish the education department this time, but he didn't do it last time. And in fact, the deep state is now trying to destroy me. Well, you had 4 years to fire a lot of federal bureaucrats, and it didn't help. It didn't happen. So do you think he's actually more aware of the problem now?
I think he is. I think he's surrounded himself with the right people. If you look at who he surrounded himself with people who care about health, people who care about war, Tulsi or RFK, no matter any personal opinions anybody might have about them, they're good people. Vivek Ramaswamy is brilliant, completely brilliant. And he kind of knows, and he's kind of admitted that I surrounded myself with the wrong people before. And I'm not going to do that again. And now he kind of has advisors who are hopefully going to help him along that path to not surround himself with, uh, what's his name? John Bolton, like just the worst imaginable swamp of people he had surrounded himself with. And he had admitted, he's like, I was new to the swamp, and I get it now. And in that time between his last term and likely his future term, he had lawfare raged against him, amounting to 800 years he could have served in prison. He had 2 attempts on his life that we know about. So I believe that he is awake now. I believe that I believe that he will commit to those promises that he made, and I believe those are things that are actually important to him. And I also believe he doesn't really care when it comes to maybe not listening to people who are in the swamp anymore like he did before.
Well, what's your pitch to someone who, let's say they just know what they've read in the media about Donald Trump, that he's threatened the media itself. I don't quite agree with that characterization, but that he says things about sending the military after enemies, that kind of thing. And someone says, well, wait, but you're all about liberty and freedom. Isn't that counter to what their views are? How do you respond when you get that question?
So when they're sent, so is this in response to Kamala Harris saying that he's going to send the military after her and his enemies in response to that?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, critical thinking, for one, they're doing exactly that. They're doing that right now. Accuse your enemy of that which you are guilty. And they did just come out, and I checked it this morning. They just came out with a directive. The Biden-Harris administration came out with a directive to the DOD that actually permits them to send the military after people. And I shared this on my page, the Redheaded Libertarian, TRHL official on X, and anybody can go take a look at it and read it themselves. So they're accusing Trump of sending the military after his enemies, but they just made that a directive in their administration to do. And I think that people need to wake up more and pay attention more and get their emotions out of this and just look at the logic and the facts, and try to recognize when you're being propagandized.
What do you think about Kamala Harris, substituted last minute for Joe Biden, running away from many of the issues that marked her campaign when she sought the presidency in 2019? In some ways, she is not portraying herself as the most radical person on the planet. Right now, she's saying, oh, no, there's not going to be an environmental mandate. There's not going to be, I'm not going to ban fracking. I'm not going to do all of these things. But, of course, that was what she stood for back then. Do you think that sell is working?
She is the first candidate who was manufactured completely by the media. I remember in 2019 when she was so unpopular, she dropped out in 2019. She was the first or second candidate to drop out of the race right after Tulsi Gabbard completely destroyed her in that debate. Um, and so they kind of took her out of the spotlight, and then they gave her a very privileged position as the vice president. And from there, they really kept her away from everything. And I think in that time, they were trying to make her likable. So that's how everybody sees her now, is like your wine mom, or your drunk aunt at a party or something like that. But she's been completely manufactured. So there were 14 million primary votes that went to Joe Biden, and she had zero. Nobody voted for her. She just was propped up, and the DNC actually changed their rules to be able to kind of usher her in through online as opposed to having these primary votes. And that's not democratic at all. And whether or not they palace coup Joe Biden, we don't know. That's possible, but she's fake. She's manufactured. She's going to say what she's told to say. She's going to say what polls good, because their point is to win and to keep power within the deep state.
Josie Glabach, Redheaded Libertarian, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much, Robbie.